Who got you into producing?
I got into producing because I was a producing fellow at the American Film Institute, so it was always my intention to produce. I had been in college head of all of student programs, so I had produced concerts and lectures and dances and so some theater, and so I had producing kind of in my bones, and I had read up on famous producers like Selznick and Raoul Walsh, and I kind of admired what they did. Of course, they were in the studio system, which I knew I was never going to have the luxury of being in. But I really wanted to be sort of that person on top that got to do everything but did nothing. You know, all of that, had got my arms around all of it, and had creative say, but on the other hand, you know, wasn't responsible for any of their specific jobs. But then, you know, mailroom, and then I was a reader and then a development executive. And eventually I learned a lot about producing from working for Peter Guber and John Peters. I think those years, those 4 years were like, you know, getting a master's PhD in producing. I watched how they packaged films, and then I learned how to line produce basically by making my first movie where I was on the hook for deficit for CBS, Pair of Aces with Willie Nelson and Chris Christopherson, and my children's college education and my house was up against the film finishing on time and not going over budget. And so I took a crash course with the line producer, and he was very good at sitting me down going, these are the things you have to do, these are the things you shouldn't do. And by the time I did my second movie where I was on the hook, I kind of knew how to line produce. So now I was an executive producer, line producer, so I could do both the creative and I could do the financial. The creative probably came from working for Peter Guber and John Peters, and the line producing came from, you know, trial by fire.
If you don't mind me asking, Stan, how did you end up in a position where your house and your children's college education was on the line?
So in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, when the television movie business was at its height, when CBS, NBC, ABC, and then eventually Fox all had movie nights. I mean, you don't remember, but at the time there was a movie night on CBS, NBC, ABC, all on Sunday night. So at 9 o'clock, there was a movie on against each other. Then CBS had a Tuesday night movie and NBC had a Monday night movie. All of those movies were made by independent suppliers because the studios didn't want to be in the television movie business because it was not financially beneficial to them. And the networks had not yet owned their own product. So the only people that were making it were independents. And I found that fascinating, that you could be both a studio and a producer at the same time, that you would own your negatives, that you would be on the hook for making sure that the picture finished on time, and it would be your money going into it. And you'd get money from a network, but then you'd have to find the international money. And eventually we all used tax credits, most of us going to Canada, when those came into fashion, and that's how you put the movie together. So we learned both how to package creatively, but also how to package financially, and then all of us, whether it was Len Hill or any of the famous television movie producers from that era, and we all were busy, we all were making 3 or 4 movies a year, primarily in Canada, but we all were on the hook for deficit, we all were taking all the risk, and then we could own it. You know, nobody in the series business was owning their shows. Those are all owned by studios, and obviously very few in the independent feature business. So the only real business during the 70s, 80s, and 90s where you could own a library, where you could amass a library, and I have 42 titles in my library, could come in the television movie business.